Last week we talked about the history of Star Trek and Gene Roddenberry bringing it to the network and the movies and all that stuff. So this week we're going to talk about the crew of the Enterprise, the universe in which they live, and what it is that makes Star Trek, I think, probably the greatest science fiction franchise of my entire lifetime. My name is Devin and this is Badass Digest. The central relationship on Star Trek, I think, that really makes the show work and has continued on is that Kirk-Spock thing with that side of McCoy. Kirk and Spock really represent the dueling sides of who we are as people. I mean, Kirk is very much this, the roaring, lusty sexuality of us, and Spock is much more the measured and reasoning and logical side of us, and they work so amazingly well together as a team. That relationship is great, but it's that McCoy seasoning that really makes it all work. This guy on the outside, just a little bit, who's always sort of like throwing cranky little jokes at each of them, sort of being kind of a pain in the ass, and really, more often than not, being much more the voice of reason than even the logical Spock. So in '66, the version of Star Trek that Roddenberry came up with was, a little bit utopian. It was idealistic, but it was also really grounded in terrific two-fisted action. Captain Kirk was very much a JFK kind of a figure. He was young, dashing, virile. He had seen action. Captain Kirk was just as likely to, have a conversation with a new alien species as he was to blow it out of the sky. Maybe my favorite thing about Star Trek is not just Captain Kirk, but William Shatner himself. Shatner is just this incredible presence, and the way that he throws himself into what he's doing, his fighting style, his ridiculous two-handed judo chop, and every fight he has, he's got to roll on the floor at least once. Who knows why? I kind of also like watching Shatner over the course of the show just get real fat. That's charming too, because you can't do that on TV anymore. So you watch season 3 and his gut is just being held in by this girdle, and he's still this space sex object. Later on in his career, Leonard Nimoy would write a book called I Am Not Spock. He really was the guy who kind of wanted to get separated from this character most of all. But there's such an element of Nimoy that his DNA is so inextricably linked into this entire show. The way that he did Spock is incredible. Nimoy also brought in some really neat personal touches. The famous Vulcan salute is actually something that he saw in Temple, the rabbi, doing. So the Vulcans apparently are all Jews. I think Nimoy obviously has gone on to be the face of Star Trek, weirdly enough. He directed, 2 of the movies. He also is the only actor to find himself in the new reboots, playing an alternate reality future version of Spock. And it's interesting because on the one hand, Shatner and Kirk are the character that we, that we think of as the main heart of Star Trek, but it isn't. The real emotional center of Star Trek is Spock, and it is Nimoy. So it's fitting that he's the guy who has crossed over into these new films. Roddenberry had not just an idea that he wanted to be a Utopian TV show, he also wanted to be a progressive TV show. So Star Trek had women on the bridge. It had people of all different races working together on the ship. The network hated that idea, by the way. There's Sulu, the helmsman. It's weird because Sulu's defining element happens very early in the series, Naked Time, when everybody begins acting out their inner selves. But it's a cool defining element because it's this guy who lives in the future who has this romantic view of the past. Nichelle Nichols wanted to quit the show, but she was talked out of it by none other than Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself. Dr. King told her that having a black woman on primetime TV working together as an equal with white men was an incredible thing to have. It was an incredible way to show the black community where they could go, and so she stayed with the show. Star Trek is the first scripted TV show to have an interracial kiss. In the 3rd season episode Plato's Stepchildren, Kirk and Uhura make out. Again, to be fair, this wasn't, totally blowing the doors off things because they were kind of forced to kiss by godlike aliens. But, you take what you can get, and to have that on television was a really big deal in 1968. This was an enormous moment. And then there's Chekov. I think Chekov really, in a lot of ways, defines what I kind of love about Star Trek. See, because Chekov didn't show up until season 2. And Chekov is added because the network insisted that Roddenberry put in a teeny bopper identifier character. And in fact, Chekov, Walter Koenig, that isn't even his hair. He's wearing a Davy Jones wig. He's supposed to look like one of the monkeys. But what Roddenberry did that was really neat was that he decided, well, if I'm going to have this teeny bopper character, I'm going to use him to push my agenda. So he put a Russian on the bridge of the Enterprise, which today is well, whatever. But in 1967, at the height of the Cold War, everybody watching this show had just lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis. The idea of a Russian hanging out with everybody else and being a pal, this is mind-blowing. This is actually as mind-blowing as having a black woman on the bridge. And Scotty's this really weird character too, because Jimmy Doohan isn't even Scottish. He's just really kind of putting on a Scotch accent.
Well, this is a drink for a man. Scotch? Aye.
And there's always this undercurrent that he's kind of a drunk, and it's fun. Trek used some of the greatest science fiction writers of its time to write episodes, and so we have episodes that are actually stunning science fiction. I mean, Sitting on the Edge of Forever, I will put up against almost any other science fiction thing, period, as just an amazing work of art. But you also have a lot of really weird stuff, like the episode where the crew gets sent down to a planet where they have to reenact the gunfight at the OK Corral. So it's this mixture of really strange stuff and really heady stuff, I think, that's kind of magical. The Klingons are probably the most specifically well-known villains in the Star Trek universe, but the universe, I think, is full of really great different kinds of races. The Romulans are a pretty great villain. They're sort of the mirror image of the Vulcans. They look just like the Vulcans, but they're quite emotional and warlike. They're introduced in one of the best episodes of the series, Balance of Terror. It's an incredibly tense, great episode. A little bit of trivia. The Romulan commander in that episode is played by a guy named Mark Leonard, who would later on go to play Spock's dad, Sarek, in later episodes of the show. There's other alien species that sort of pop up on the periphery of Star Trek that really made a huge impression. The Gorn, this reptile race that Kirk fights in the episode The Arena. One appearance, but I would say the Gorn is probably one of the most popular alien species in the Star Trek universe. And then, of course, you can't talk about Star Trek villains and not talk about Khan Noonien Singh. Khan is a really interesting character because his original episode, Space Seed, is kind of a minor episode. It's Ricardo Montalban playing Khan, though, that really, I think, makes that character really special. Bringing him back for Wrath of Khan was brilliant. The Star Trek movies began to really sort of examine what it is to be old, and bringing back an old villain was the perfect way to have Kirk really face his mortality. And this was the kind of thing that Roddenberry wanted to do. Roddenberry wanted to sneak in these morality stories. He wanted to make it so that you were enjoying the outer space adventures, enjoying the crew, enjoying the action, but also learning about tolerance, learning about working together, and sort of coming to the idea that the future could be a place where maybe everything wasn't quite so up. Well, you know what? I could sit here and talk to you guys about Star Trek forever. I mean, Trek and Planet of the Apes. You ever see me, buy me a beer, we're gonna sit down and never stop talking about these things. In the meantime, leave your comments below. Let me know what your favorite episode is. Let me know who your favorite character is. I know there's gotta be a big contingent of Chekov fans out there. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode going forward. I'll be back here again next week with something completely different, but hopefully just as badass as this. My name is Devin Faraci, and this is Badass Digest.
Get your film fix. Subscribe to CineFix.